Hello, bruvs. We're back with Black No More by George S. Schuyler, a 1931 Harlem Renaissance book written by this man who became a conservative, of all things, during the civil rights. I don't know if he became a conservative during the civil rights era, but he was against it. So, curious read. Chapter 5, and it's going to be broken up into two parts because it's rather long. The first part will be rather short. 5. A huge silver monoplane glided gracefully to the surface of Mines Field in Los Angeles and came to a pretty stop after a short run. A liveried footman stepped out of the forward compartment, armed with a stool which he placed under the rear door. Simultaneously, a high-powered foreign car swept up close to the airplane and waited. The rear door of the airplane opened, and to the apparent surprise of the nearby mechanics, a tall, black, distinguished-looking Negro stepped out and down to the ground, assisted by the hand of the footman. Behind him came a pale young man and a woman, evidently secretaries. The three entered the limousine, which rapidly drove off. "Who's that?" asked one of the mechanics, round-eyed and respectful, like all Americans, in the presence of great wealth. "Don't you know who that is?" inquired another, pityingly. "Why, that's Dr. Crookman. You know, the fellow what's turning white. See that B&M on the side of his plane? That stands for Black No More. Gee, I wish I had just half the jack he's made in the last 6 months." "Why, I thought from reading the papers," protested the first speaker, "that the law had closed up his places and put him out of business." "Oh, that's a lot of hockey," said the other fellow. "Why, just yesterday the newspaper said that Black No More was opening a place on Central Avenue. They already got one in Oakland, so told me yesterday." "'S funny," ventured a third mechanic as they wheeled the big plane into a nearby hangar. "How he don't have nothing but white folks around him. He must not like help. His chauffeur's white, his footman's white, and that young gallon feller what was with him are white." "How do you know?" challenged the first speaker. "They may be darkies that he turned into white folks." "That's right," the others replied. "It's getting so you can't tell who's who. I think that their Knights of Nordica ought to do something about it. I joined up with them 2 months ago, but they ain't done nothing but sell me an old uniform and hold a couple of meetings. They lapsed into silence. Sandal, the erstwhile Senegalese, stepped from the cockpit grinning. "Ah, these Americans," he muttered to himself as he went over the engine, examining everything minutely. "Where'd you come from, buddy?" asked one of the mechanics. "Danvere," Sandal replied. "What you doing, making a trip around the country?" queried another. "Yes, we're what you call 'em, on the tour inspection," the aviator continued. They could think of no more to say and soon strolled off. Around an oval table on the 7th floor of a building on Central Avenue sat Dr. Junius Crookman, Hank Johnson, Chuck Foster, Ranford the doctor's secretary, and 4 other men. At the lower end of the table, Miss Bennett, Ranford's stenographer, was taking notes. A soft-treading waiter whose Negro nature was only revealed by his mocking obsequiousness served each with champagne. "To our continued success," cried the physician, lifting his glass high. "To our continued success," echoed the others. They drained their glasses and returned them to the polished surface of the table. "Dog bite it, Doc," blurted Johnson. "Us show is doing fine. Ain't had a bad break since we started. And 'tis the 1st of September." "Don't holler too soon," cautioned Foster. "The opposition is growing keener every day. I had to pay $75,000 more for this building than it's worth." "Well, you got it, didn't you?" asked Johnson. "Just like I allus say, when you got money, you can get anything in this man's country. Whenever things look tight, just pull out the old checkbook and everything's all right." "Optimist," grunted Foster. "I ain't no pessimist," Johnson accused. "Now, gentlemen," Dr. Crookman interrupted, clearing his throat, "let's get down to business. We have met here, as you know, not only for the purpose of celebrating the opening of this, our 50th sanitarium, but also to take stock of our situation. I have before me here a detailed report of our business affairs for the entire period of 7 months and a half that we've been in operation. During that time, we have put into service 50 sanitariums from coast to coast, or an average of one every 4.5 days. The average capacity of each sanitarium being 105 patients. Each place has a staff of 6 physicians and 24 nurses, a janitor, 4 orderlies, 2 electricians, bookkeeper, cashier, stenographer, and record clerk, not counting 4 guards. For the past 4 months, we have had an equipment factory in Pittsburgh in full operation and a chemical plant in Philadelphia. In addition to this, we have purchased 4 airplanes and a radio broadcasting station. Our expenditures for real estate, salaries, and chemicals have totaled $6,255,085.10. Hee hee, chuckled Johnson. Dat 10 cents must be for one of them bad cigars that Foster smokes. Our total income, continued Dr. Cookman, frowning slightly at the interruption, has been $18,500,300, or $370,006 patients at $50 apiece. I think that vindicates my contention at the beginning that the fee should be but $50. Within the reach of the rank and file of Negroes, he laid aside his report and added, in the next 4 months, we'll double our output, and by the end of the year, we should cut the fee to $25. He lightly twirled his wax mustache between his long, sensitive fingers and smiled with satisfaction. Yes, said Foster, the sooner we get this business over with, the better. We're going to run into a whole lot more opposition from now on than we have so far encountered. Why, man, growled Johnson, we ain't even started on these darkies yet, and we get through with these here, we can work on them in the West Indies. Believe me, Ondoin never wanted this graft to end. Now, continued Dr. Kirkman, I want to say that Mr. Foster deserves great praise for the industry and ingenuity he has shown in purchasing our real estate. And Mr. Johnson deserves equally great praise for the efficient manner in which he has kept down the opposition of the various city officials. As you know, he has spent nearly $1 million in such endeavors, and almost as much again in molding legislative sentiment in Washington and the various state capitals. That accounts for the fact that every bill introduced in a legislature or municipal court to put us out of business has died in committee. Moreover, through his corps of secret operatives, we are mostly young women. He has placed numbers of officials who are mostly young women. He has placed numbers of officials and legislators in a position where they cannot openly oppose our efforts. A smile of appreciation went around the circle. We'll have a whole lot to do from now on, commented Foster. Yeah, big boy, replied the ex-gambler. And what it takes to do it, I ain't got nothing else but. Certainly, said the physician. Our friend Hank has not been overburdened with scruples. I don't know what that is, Chief, grinned Johnson, but I knows what a checkbook will do. Even these crackers tone down when I talks bucks. This afternoon, continued Crookman, we also have with us 3 regional directors, Doctors Henry Dogan, Charles Hinkle, and Fred Selden, as well as our chief chemist, Wallace Butts. I thought it would be a good idea to bring you all together for this occasion so we could get better acquainted. We'll just have a nice word from each of them. They're all good racemen, you know, even if they have, like the rest of our staff, taken the treatment. For the next 3/4 of an hour, the 3 directors and the chief chemist reported on the progress of their work. At intervals, the waiter brought in cold drinks, cigars, and cigarettes. Overhead whirred the electric fans. Out of the wide open windows could be seen the panorama of bungalows, pavements, palm trees, trundling streetcars, and scooting automobiles. Lord, 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 Johnson exclaimed at the conclusion of the meeting, going to the window and gazing out over the city. Just give me a couple of this graph and I'll make Henry Ford look like a tramp. Meanwhile, Negro society was in turmoil and chaos. The colored folk, in straining every nerve to get the Black No More treatment, had forgotten all loyalties, affiliations, and responsibilities. No longer did they flock to the churches on Sundays or pay dues to their numerous fraternal organizations. They had stopped giving anything to the anti-lynching campaign. Santop Licorice, head of the once flourishing Back to Africa Society, was daily raising his stentorian voice in denunciation of the race for deserting his organization. Negro business was, oh no, the pages are starting to come out now. This ain't good. Negro business was being no less hard hit. Few people were bothering about getting their hair straightened or skin whitened temporarily when for a couple of weeks' pay they could get both jobs done permanently. The immediate result of this change on the past of the Negro public was to almost bankrupt the firms that made the whitening and straightening chemicals. They were largely controlled by canny Hebrews, but at least a half dozen were owned by Negroes. The rapid decline in this business greatly decreased the revenue of the Negro weekly newspapers, who depended upon such advertising for their sustenance. The actual business of hair straightening that had furnished employment to thousands of colored women who would otherwise have had to go back to washing and ironing declines to such an extent that to rent signs hung in front of 9/10 of the shops. The Negro politicians in the various black belts, grown fat and sleek, protecting vice with the aid of Negro votes, which they were able to control by virtue of housing segregation, lectured in vain about black solidarity, race pride, and political emancipation, but nothing stopped the exodus to the white race. Gloomily, the politicians sat in their offices, wondering whether to throw up the sponge and hunt the nearest Black No More sanitarium or hold on a little longer in the hope that the whites might put a stop to the activities of Dr. Crookman and his associates. The latter, indeed, was their only hope, because the bulk of Negroes saving their dimes and dollars for chromatic emancipation had stopped gambling, patronizing houses of prostitution, or staging Saturday night brawls. Thus, the usual source of graft vanished. The black politicians appealed to their white masters for succor, of course, but they found, to their dismay, that most of the latter had been safely bribed by the astute Hank Johnson. Gone was the almost European atmosphere of every Negro ghetto. The music, laughter, gaiety, jesting, and abandon. Instead, one noted the same excited bustle, wild looks, and strained faces to be seen in a wartime soldier camp, around the new oil district, or before a gold rush. The happy-go-lucky Negro of song and story was gone forever, and in his stead was a nervous, money-grubbing black, stuffing away coin and socks, impatiently awaiting a sufficient sum to pay Dr. Crookman's fee. Up from the south they came in increasing droves, besieging the Black No More sanitariums for treatment. There were none of these havens in the South because of the hostility of the bulk of white people. But there were many all along the border between the two sections, at such places as Washington, D.C., Baltimore, Cincinnati, Louisville, Evansville, Cairo, St. Louis, and Denver. The various southern communities attempted to stem this, the greatest migration of Negroes in the history of the country, but without avail. By train, boat, wagon, bicycle, automobile, and foot, they trekked to the promised land. A hopeful procession filtering through the outposts of police and Knights of Nordica volunteer hands. Where there was a great opposition to the Negroes going, there would suddenly appear large quantities of free bootleg liquor and crisp new currency, which would make the most vigilant white opponent of Black No More turn his head the other way. Hank Johnson seemed to be able to cope with almost every situation. And we shall stop there because I still have at least 16 pages to go, and that's usually the normal chapter, and I'm not going to read for 45 minutes straight here. So that's all. Goodbye, bravs. Goodbye.